So good to be with you guys for our daily devotion. They've given me one verse today. We're in the book of Hebrews, chapter 11. We're going through what many have classically labeled the Hall of Faith, because in this chapter, we're getting example after example after example of how these men and women lived by faith in God. And if you haven't had a chance to, I would love for you to go back to our Sunday sermon message, which we kind of really look at faith and go, where does faith come from? Is it something that we all naturally are born with and we just kind of like grow it and shape it and fine tune it at some point, and then we put that faith in Christ and he changes our hearts and our affections for him? Or that was one path, and that's what many teach in the church today, or the other path, which is what I taught and which is what the Sunday sermon is about if you get a chance to see it, which is it's a gift of God. Our faith is a gift of God that's given to us. And when we're talking about faith, we're talking about the gift to trust in the promises of God. And ultimately, the biggest trust in the promises of God is salvation in Jesus Christ and Jesus Christ alone. So saving faith. So chapter 11 of Hebrews, we see the author of Hebrews is showing us that it's always been by faith that God's people have walked with him. A faith that has been gifted to them that they applied in their circumstance. So we just finished Abraham, and the next person in the story is our verse today. So it is verse 20, one verse. By faith, Isaac invoked future blessing on Jacob and Esau. Now, if you're familiar with the story, you might know exactly what's happening. If you were to read verse 21, and then it jumps to Jacob. So this is it. Isaac gets a one verse kind of by faith moment from the Hall of Faith in the book of Hebrews. So what's going on here? Well, let's jump back to Genesis. Let's look at Genesis 27, and we can see that right at 26, we can kind of pick up the story of exactly what's happening and taking place here. And if you get an opportunity, read chapters 26 and 27 in Genesis to give you much more bigger scope. But basically, Isaac has two sons, Esau and Jacob. Esau is the oldest. Esau naturally in that community would get the blessing that would come as being the oldest. Jacob's younger, twins. We know that Rebekah, Isaac's wife, is working with her son Jacob to receive this blessing. Remember, this blessing is huge. The blessing and the promise went to Abraham, then to Isaac. Now this promise and this blessing will then go to whom Isaac blesses. Now Isaac is old. He's on his, I wouldn't necessarily say his death, but as he's aging and he's bad of sight and he can't see well and hear very well, he gets his son to come up to him, and Rebekah and Jacob work out a plan to basically trick dad into thinking that dad thinks he's going to be blessing Esau. And here's the story. Here we go. Verse 26. Then his father, Isaac, said to him, "Come near and kiss me, my son," thinking that that's Esau coming in for his blessing. So he came near and kissed him, and Isaac smelled the smell of his garments and blessed him and said this, "See, the smell of my son is as the smell of the field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you the dew of heaven, of the fatness of the earth, and the plenty of the grain and wine. Let the peoples serve you, and the nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you." And then in verse 30, it says, as soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, then Jacob had scarcely gone out from his presence of Isaac. His father Esau came in from his hunting. Then Esau, verse 31, he also prepared delicious food and brought it to his father. And his father said to my father, "Let my father arise, eat of his son's game, that you may bless me." And his father Isaac said to him, Who are you?" And he answered, "I'm your son, your firstborn, Esau." And then Isaac trembled very violently and said, "Who was it then that hunted game, brought it to me? I ate it all before you came, and I have blessed him." And then kind of that we know where the story goes. It was Jacob fooling dad with the help of mom. And so that is what is happening here. We see in verse 20 of Hebrews now, by faith, so he's trusting in the promises that went to his father Abraham, the promises that went to him as Isaac, and then Isaac is passing on these promises of the Lord trusting that these promises that God will foresee as the future plays out. And he's looking to give it to Esau, but he actually gives it to Jacob. But for Isaac's standpoint, he's walking in faith, trusting in God, trusting that God to send out his promises. And then we even know by hindsight, and the rest of the story goes in Genesis, that even though he was tricked and fooled, he knew and understood the sovereignty of God, that the promise was then going to come through Jacob. So kind of a unique story, a unique way to look at faith, a unique way that Isaac had to come to terms that even though he was kind of duped and tricked, that the promises of God will always move forward. And so that's a great way for us to end. No matter what we do, no matter what we think, no matter what action we put into plan, we will not thwart God's plan. So I think for us as Christians, we should just make sure that we're always on God's plan in this book, living out our faith, trusting in the promises, acting out on the promises, being obedient to the promises, because they're not going to change and they will succeed. Let's just be a part of it and do it with joy and gladness. Hope this encourages you today and encourages you to live out your faith today. Just take one day at a time. God bless you guys.